In the 5th year of their marriage, Gu Qinzhou discovered that Su Wan was having an affair. When he slammed the paternity test report onto the table, he laughed aloud. Very good. 1 week later, the lover, Zhou Mubai's company went bankrupt, and all its assets were mysteriously acquired. You like hauling bricks? Gu Qinzhou jammed a safety helmet onto his head. Go to the construction site. Livestream yourself kowtowing 100 times every day. Su Wan woke up in the slums, clad only in her underwear. Every penny in your name was being used to support that man and your bastard child. When the child fell critically ill and needed a blood transfusion, Gu Qinzhou clutched the lab report and sneered, a pity. His blood type and mine have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Gu Qinzhou pushed open the heavy mahogany door of the study, instantly muffling most of the faint clamor from the banquet hall outside. Light from the crystal chandelier sliced a fleeting ribbon of brightness across the carpet through the opening, before vanishing just as quickly. The air held the lingering scent of cigars, mixed with the cloying sweetness of expensive champagne. It was his son Gun Yinin's 3rd birthday party, a scene of perfumed elegance and social toasting. He was the center of this grand feast, the winner in the eyes of others, peaking in both career and family. The helmsman of the Gu Group, with a beautiful wife and beloved son in his arms. His life was as perfect and rounded as a finely carved work of art. He tugged at the tie constricting his Adam's apple and walked toward the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Outside lay the nightscape of Beicheng, so brilliant it verged on artificial, with neon lights resembling a flowing galaxy. He picked up the half-glass of whiskey that had long since gone cold on the desk. The amber liquid left viscous trails clinging to the glass. He threw his head back and downed it. The burning sensation seared from his throat to his stomach, yet could not suppress the icy void in the depths of his heart. He didn't know when this void had appeared, but in the last few months, it had begun to spread and gnaw at him frantically. Like that dusty copy of Anna Karenina on the bookshelf, Su Wan used to love reading it to him, but somehow it had eventually been shoved into a corner. He and Su Wan had been married for 5 years. The speed of time was alarming. To the outside world, they were a model couple. He, Gu Qinzhou, the young yet iron-fisted chairman of the Gu Group. She, Su Wan, a former rising ballet star, now the elegant and poised Mrs. Gu. Their son, Gun Yinin, was the perfect crystallization of their love, intelligent and beautiful, the very apple of Gu Qinzhou's eye. But something had changed. It was subtle, like the ice-crackle glaze quietly spreading across porcelain. The cool, crisp silver mountain water, perfume Su Wan wore had, at some point, been replaced by a strange, cloyingly sweet floral scent. She had changed her phone password to one he had never seen, and she placed her phone's screen down with increasing frequency. She used the excuse of napping with her son for longer and longer periods. Yet once, when Gu Qinzhou came home early and pushed open the nursery door, he saw only his son sleeping quietly in the small bed. Su Wan was not in the room. Late at night on the balcony, her voice on the phone was hushed low, carrying a sticky, almost coquettish tone he had never heard before. When he approached silently, the voice would stop abruptly. She would turn around, her face wearing an instantly composed, impeccable mask of gentle smiling. Qinzhou, why haven't you slept yet? Is something wrong at the company? She always asked like this, her eyes clear, without a single flaw to be found. Gu Qinzhou had tried to convince himself that his own suspicions were conjuring ghosts, that the deception and intrigue of the business world had made him neurotic, causing him to doubt even the person sharing his pillow. The limit on the supplementary card he gave Su Wan was top tier. She never lacked for jewelry or couture. Materially, he had never shortchanged her by a penny. He even deliberately turned down social engagements to squeeze out time to take her and their son on an island vacation. On the fine white sands of the Maldives, Yinan laughed as he chased the waves while Su Wan nestled against his side. The sea breeze brushed her long hair against his arm. The warmth of that moment felt so real, he almost believed he had been overthinking things. But that void was not filled. Instead, beneath the veneer of false sweetness, a deeper chill bred. That is, until half a month ago, when Gun Yinan accidentally scraped his knee at kindergarten and was sent to the hospital for treatment. When Gu Qinzhou arrived in a rush, a nurse was just coming out with a lab report and mentioned in passing, "Mr. Gu, your son is type O. It's a very common universal blood type, which is good." Type O. Gu Chenzhou's feet were abruptly nailed to the spot. His blood seemed to freeze in an instant, then came crashing up to his head. He clearly remembered that he was blood type AB, and Su Wan. His mind was a mess, yet he was absolutely certain that on Su Wan's premarital medical exam, the report stated she was type A. A type AB father and a type A mother. How could they possibly produce a type O child? A cold, barbed thought bit into his heart like a venomous snake. The home, meticulously constructed over 5 years, that place where he had poured all his softness and expectations, gave a tooth-aching groan as its very foundation cracked. He suppressed the raging storm within him. With an impassive face, he took the form from the nurse's hand, his fingertips ice cold. After comforting his son, who was still sobbing with fright, he immediately contacted the most authoritative and secretive paternity testing agency in Beijing. He collected the samples personally. Late at night, while Su Wan slept soundly beside their son, he acted like a thief, carefully gathering mucosal cells from the inside of the boy's cheek with a sterile cotton swab. As for his own sample, he drew it directly from his blood. The wait that followed was pure torture, every minute and every second feeling like death by 1,000 cuts. He went to the office as usual, reviewing documents, presiding over meetings, and issuing orders. He still came home for dinner, listening to Su Wan speak in her soft, gentle voice about the day's amusing anecdotes concerning their son, playing the role of an impeccable husband and father. Only he knew that the heart within his chest was being roasted over a slow fire, scorching bit by bit until it reeked of char. When he looked at Su Wan, his scrutinizing gaze was tempered with ice. Deep within that void, a blizzard capable of destroying everything was brewing. Today was the day the results were due. The sealed envelope that would determine his fate now lay in the bottom drawer of his desk, secured by combination lock. The sounds of laughter and joy from the banquet hall drifted through the heavy wooden door, muffled and indistinct, as if filtered through frosted glass. Gu Chenzhou set down his empty glass. The base hit the mahogany desktop with a dull thud. He took a deep breath. Air thick with the scent of cigars and alcohol filled his lungs, bringing only a deeper sense of suffocation. He turned, his movements carrying a resolution that bordered on desperation, and walked toward the desk that symbolized the center of his power. Fingerprint verified. The drawer slid open silently. The pure white envelope, stamped with the agency's insignia, lay quietly inside, a Pandora's box waiting to be opened. He reached out. His fingertips paused, almost imperceptibly, the moment they brushed against the smooth paper. Then, with a steady hand, he pulled it out. It was so light, yet so heavy. Without hesitation, he tore open the seal. The sound of tearing paper seemed piercingly loud in the overly quiet study. He extracted the report. His gaze skipped over the paragraphs of technical jargon and data charts, scanning like a precision instrument to lock directly onto the conclusion section on the final page. There, in cold, black-printed type, was a single line. Based on DNA analysis results, Gu Chenzhou, Sample A, is excluded as the biological father of Gu Nianin, Sample B. Time seemed to freeze in that moment, stretching out into infinity. The bustle of the city outside, the faint chatter from the banquet hall, even the sound of his own heartbeat and breathing, it all vanished. The world reduced to a dead silence of white noise. Gu Chenzhou's eyes were riveted to that line of text. Every word was a red-hot steel rod, stabbing viciously into his eyes and piercing straight through to his brain, leaving a charred brand. Excluded, biological father. He mouthed the words silently, every syllable tasting of rusty blood. 5 years of marriage. Over 1,800 days and nights. The trust he had given, the affection he had bestowed, the energy he had invested, all the heart and soul he had poured into this home. And that tiny figure he had cradled in his arms, taught to walk and talk, and regarded as the continuation of his own life, Gu Nianin. It turned out it was all a lie. A meticulously orchestrated, absolute fraud. He was like a fool, a monumental idiot kept in the dark, wearing a green hat and raising another man's bastard. An indescribable torrent of monstrous rage bone-deep humiliation and cold tyranny instantly smashed through the dam of his sanity. Blood rushed madly to his limbs, only to freeze into ice at his heart. His body trembled uncontrollably, not from fear, but from a desire for destruction that was clawing to break free, a desire strong enough to burn everything to ash. The knuckles of the hand, gripping the report, turned white from the force. The thin paper groaned under his fingers, nearly crumpled to dust. Then he laughed. It wasn't a roar of anger, nor a scream of agony. A low, short laugh, tempered with the chill of hell, rang out abruptly in the silent study. He raised his head, his unfocused gaze staring into the void, while the corners of his mouth hooked up into an unnaturally cold, twisted arc. The emptiness deep in his eyes had been completely filled by an extreme, blood-curdling darkness, churning with a storm of pure destruction. Good. Very good. Su-Wan. And that man hiding in the shadows, the one who had planted this lush green pasture atop Guchinzhou's head. He had received this grand gift. Now, it was his turn to return the favor. Slowly, with great care, he smoothed out the crumpled report sheet bit by bit, his movements as gentle as if he were handling a rare treasure. Then he stepped up to the desk and swept his arm across it violently. Crash! The crystal ashtray, pen holder, and scattered files on the desk were violently swept to the floor, crashing with an ear-piercing shatter. On the now empty desk, only the paternity test report remained. He placed it squarely in the center of the sleek rosewood surface, like a sacrificial offering. Under the overhead light, the stinging black words on the page were as clear as a judgment. He looked down at it, his smile deepening, yet his eyes held no warmth, only a bottomless, crazily burning darkness. Very good. This time, he enunciated the two words clearly. His voice was low and steady, yet like a blade coated in ice shards, it scraped through the air, leaving behind an invisible scent of blood. The clamor of the banquet was shut out. Inside the study, the prelude to a bloody reckoning against the betrayers had already begun. The air seemed to solidify into lead, so heavy it was suffocating. Only the twin clusters of dark fire in Guchinzhou's eyes danced silently and madly. He inhaled the freezing air, tasting the scent of rosewood and the lingering, biting aroma of whiskey. The twisted smile on Guchinzhou's face was like a stone cast into a frozen lake. It stirred only a faint ripple before instantly sinking into the bottomless, frigid depths. He looked no longer at the glaring report on the desk. Turning around, he strode toward the study's safe. The heavy metal door slid open silently. He retrieved a pitch-black satellite phone with no brand markings. He pressed the single speed dial key. It rang less than half a time before it was picked up. A flat, emotionless male voice answered. "Mr. Gu, it's me." Guchinzhou's voice was as cold and hard as quenched iron. "Activate the cleaner protocol. Maximum level. Target 1. Su-Wan. Past 5 years. All communication records, movement logs, financial transactions, and contacts. Precision down to the minute. Flag any anomalies. Target 2. Gunyanin. From birth to present. All medical records, blood type reports, and medical staff contacts. Verify if original data has been tampered with. Target 3. Identify all males in Su-Wan's social circle aged 30 to 40 with the financial means or conditions to maintain a long-term illicit relationship. Preliminary screen for trajectory overlaps with Target 1. He spoke rapidly, his instructions crystal clear, every word like a poison-dipped ice needle. Understood. Phase 1 report within 72 hours. The voice on the other end remained flat, but exuded a terrifying efficiency. 24 hours. Guchinzhou interrupted him, brooking no argument. "I want core leads." "Yes, Mr. Gu." 24 hours. The call ended. The study fell back into a dead silence, save for Guchinzhou's own heavy, suppressed breathing. He walked to the liquor cabinet, skipped the glass, twisted open a new bottle of single malt whiskey, and threw his head back to take a large swig. The spicy liquid scorched his esophagus, yet strangely allowed the violent, murderous intent rampaging through his limbs to settle slightly, condensing into a sharper, colder weapon. He sank back into the large leather chair, his fingers unconsciously tapping the cold armrest. The light cast deep shadows across his chiseled face, half in light, half in darkness, just like his fractured soul at this moment. Rage and humiliation roared in the dark, while in the light, the absolute reason and cold calculation belonging to the helmsman of the Gu family were operating with unprecedented efficiency. Su-Wan, that man, what did they start? Had they been carrying on under Gu Qinzhou's nose for 5 years? Or even longer? Every time she used napping with their son as an excuse, the whispers on the balcony late at night, the unfamiliar perfume on her, countless suspicions he had ignored or deliberately suppressed, now turned into bloody shards, spinning madly and piecing themselves together in his mind. Time passed second by second. Outside the window, neon lights flashed tirelessly. Gu Qinzhou was like a silent volcano, quiet on the surface, but inside, magma boiled, waiting only for the trigger to erupt. His phone screen lit up, not the satellite phone, but his personal encrypted phone. The name Su-Wan danced on the screen. Gu Qinzhou stared at those 2 words, his gaze as cold as if he were looking at a corpse. A few seconds later, he slid to answer, his voice instantly adjusted to be completely ripple-free, even carrying a perfectly measured hint of fatigue. Wan. Qinzhou, Su-Wan's soft, beautiful voice came through, with faint birthday songs and children playing in the background. Are you still in the study? Everyone is waiting for you to cut the cake. Nianin keeps asking where Daddy went. Her tone held a touch of coquettish complaint, watertight and flawless. Gu Qinzhou's mouth twitched downwards silently into a mocking arc. Handling some urgent documents. I'll be right there. His voice remained gentle, betraying no flaws. All right, hurry up. The little guy is getting anxious waiting. Su-Wan suspected nothing, her tone cheerful. The call ended. The gentle mask on Gu Qinzhou's face peeled away instantly, leaving only a bone-chilling coldness. He stood up, straightened the tie he had loosened earlier, and adjusted his facial expression against his blurred reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. A few seconds later, Gu Qinzhou appeared in the glass, bearing a hint of apology and fatigue, but with a gentle gaze. He pulled open the study door. Warm light, the noise of the crowd, and the sweet scent of cake surged in instantly. Outside was a flawless fairy tale world constructed of money and lies, and he was about to tear it apart with his own hands. In the banquet hall, the atmosphere was at its peak. A huge 3-tiered fondant cake, shaped like a castle, held 3 flickering candles. Gu Nianin, dressed in a small suit, was held in Su-Wan's arms. His exquisitely sculpted face was flushed red with excitement. Seeing Gu Qinzhou emerge, he immediately reached out his short arms and shouted in a milky voice, "Daddy, cut the cake." Su-Wan wore a champagne-colored off-shoulder long dress, her smile gentle and moving, her eyes looking at Gu Qinzhou filled with love and reliance. The surrounding guests, business elites, and old family friends, cast glances of envy or flattery. Chairman Gu really has it all, a successful career and a happy family. Mrs. Gu is so lucky. Chairman Gu dotes on you and the young master so much. Nianin looks just like Chairman Gu. He will definitely be a dragon among men in the future. These words, heard by Gu Qinzhou at this moment, were 10 million times more ironic than the most vicious curses. They were like countless red-hot needles, densely piercing every inch of his nerves. He maintained an impeccable expression on his face, bearing a hint of a humble smile, and walked to his wife and son. Sorry for keeping everyone waiting. He naturally reached out and took his son from Su-Wan's arms. Gu Nianin's small, soft body snuggled against his chest, carrying the unique milky scent and warmth of a child. Just yesterday, this sensation had softened his heart. Now, however, it was like holding a searing branding iron, burning his skin, reminding him of that nauseating truth. This child had someone else's blood flowing in his veins. It was irrefutable proof of Su-Wan's betrayal. He fought back the urge to throw the child away, his arms stiff as he held him. Daddy cut the cake. Gu Nianin, completely unaware, clapped his little hands excitedly and pointed at the exquisite chocolate night on the cake. Okay, Daddy will cut the biggest piece for Nianin. Gu Chenzhou's voice was low and gentle. He picked up the cake knife. The blade reflected a cold light under the lamps. His hand, gripping the handle, went white at the knuckle from excessive force, and the veins on the back of his hand bulged slightly. The sharp knife sliced into the soft cake base, making a faint rustling sound. Cream and frosting were sliced cleanly apart. Gu Chenzhou's movements were steady and powerful, a genial smile on his face as he accepted the blessings and envious gazes of the crowd. Only he knew that every cut felt like he was slicing his own heart into pieces. He wasn't cutting a cake. He was cutting through the life he had lived so self-righteously for the past 5 years. He was cutting into the grave he had built with his own hands for Su Wan and that illicit lover, a grave that was about to be completely destroyed. The cake was served to Su Wan. She smiled beautifully, took the plate, used a small fork to pick up a piece, and held it to Gu Chenzhou's lips, her eyes brimming with affection. "Honey, you've worked hard. The first bite is for you." Gu Chenzhou looked at her flawless, beautiful face inches away, looking at the fake tenderness in her eyes. His stomach churned violently, a strong sense of nausea rushing to his throat. He turned his head slightly, avoiding the fork. His voice remained gentle, though with a trace of imperceptible tension. "You eat it. I'm not very hungry." Su Wan paused for a moment, then gave him a lovingly reproachful look. "You get so busy you forget to eat on time again." She naturally retracted her hand and ate the piece of cake herself, her movements elegant. Gu Chenzhou looked away, his gaze sweeping across the room. Well-dressed guests chatted and laughed. The crystal chandelier refracted mesmerizing light. Beneath this glitzy facade, dark currents surged. Like a detached hunter, amidst the noise, he calmly captured every trace the prey might leave behind. He noticed Su Wan occasionally glancing subconsciously at her phone. Although the movements were fast, the fleeting, subtle emotion in her eyes, so out of place with the surrounding atmosphere, did not escape his notice. The banquet finally drew to a close. After sending off the last batch of guests, the massive villa instantly fell silent, leaving only the faint sounds of servants cleaning up the mess. Gun Yinan, tired from playing, had already fallen into a deep sleep in the nanny's arms. There was a trace of weariness on Su Wan's face, but it was overshadowed by satisfaction. She walked over, naturally linking her arm through Gu Chenzhou's and rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Her voice carried a languid sweetness. "It's finally over. I am exhausted. Husband, shall we? I still have an international video conference to attend." Gu Chenzhou imperceptibly withdrew his arm from her embrace. His tone was calm, laced with the resignation of work obligations. "You take Yinan to bed first. Don't wait for me." The smile on Su Wan's face stiffened slightly, but she immediately nodded with understanding. "All right, don't stay up too late." She stood on her tiptoes, intending to plant a good-night kiss on his cheek. Gu Chenzhou turned his head away, almost instinctively, yet with extreme subtlety. The kiss landed near his jawline instead. Su Wan seemed not to notice. She smiled gently, then turned and walked toward the nanny's room to check on their son. Gu Chenzhou stood rooted to the spot, watching her graceful silhouette disappear around the corner of the corridor. He raised his hand, scrubbing the spot where she had just kissed him, forcefully and repeatedly, until the skin turned red, as if trying to wipe away some vile, repulsive contaminant. He did not return to his study. Instead, he walked straight to an inconspicuous storage room on the top floor of the villa. Pushing open the door, he revealed a space cluttered with sundries. He walked to the far end, moved aside a heavy, old picture frame, and exposed a safe embedded in the wall behind it. He entered the password and scanned his fingerprint again. This time, what he took out was not the satellite phone, but a black signal receiver, palm-sized and minimalist in design. He skillfully flipped the switch. A faint red dot immediately lit up on the microscreen on the side, accompanied by latitude and longitude coordinates. Another interface on the screen displayed a densely packed, constantly scrolling stream of data, intercepted real-time communications from Su Wan's phone. The location of the red dot showed Beicheng, Xishan Maplewoods Villa District, Building A7. Gu Chenzhou's pupils suddenly contracted, like a venomous snake locking onto its prey. Xishan Maplewoods. That was one of the most high-end villa districts in Beicheng. Its residents were either wealthy or powerful. Building A7. He recalled that the property was registered under an overseas offshore company with an extremely complex background, so complex that even he hadn't paid it special attention before. He immediately took out the satellite phone and dialed again. Building A7. Owner information, actual controller, background, everything. 5 minutes. His voice was as cold as a blade scraping against metal. There was a second of silence on the other end. Yes, the 5 minutes of waiting felt as long as a century. Gu Chenzhou stared at the stable red dot on the signal receiver, his eyes dark as an abyss. The data stream jumped occasionally, indicating that Su Wan's phone was in standby mode, with no incoming or outgoing calls or messages. Soon, the satellite phone vibrated. An encrypted message came through. The content was concise, yet shocking. Target: Zhou Mubai. Age: 35. Identity: founder and CEO of Mukin Capital. Connection to Su Wan. University classmate. First love. Actual owner of Building A7. Key points: multiple hidden accounts under Su Wan's name regularly transfer large sums of funds to Zhou Mubai's personal accounts and Mukin Capital associated accounts. Trajectory overlap. In the past 3 years, their trajectories have overlapped by 87%, mostly at Building A7 and secluded private clubs. Day of birth. On the day Gun Yinan was born, Zhou Mubai appeared at the same hospital under the guise of visiting a friend and stayed for over 6 hours. Preliminary conclusion. Su Wan and Zhou Mubai have maintained a long-term extramarital affair. Paternity. High probability that Zhou Mubai is the biological father of Gun Yinan. Message end. Zhou Mubai. Gu Chenzhou pronounced the name one word at a time. His voice was as light as a whisper, yet it carried a killing intent capable of freezing the soul. University classmate. First love. Mukin Capital. Using his, Gu Chenzhou's, money to support her lover and her bastard child. Even on the day his son was born, that wretched pair was together in the hospital. Right under his nose, a monstrous wave of rage and humiliation swept over him again, more violent than before, threatening to shatter the veneer of rationality he struggled to maintain. He slammed his fist violently against the wall. A dull thud echoed through the cramped storage room. Intense pain shot through his knuckles. The skin split instantly, oozing beads of bright crimson blood. The pain caused a madness in his eyes to recede slightly, replaced by a coldness that was deeper and far more terrifying. He licked his split knuckles, tasting the metallic tang of blood. Good. The prey was finally completely exposed in the crosshairs. Su Wan. Zhou Mubai, your joyride is over. Gu Chenzhou slowly straightened up and picked up the satellite phone, his voice returning to that extreme, bone-chilling calm. Target locked. Zhou Mubai Mukin Capital. Activate Operation Hurricane. I wanted to vanish completely within 72 hours. A crisp, clean response came from the other end of the satellite phone. Copy that. Operation Hurricane initiated. Target, Mukin Capital. Countdown commencing. This was followed immediately by the busy tone of a disconnected line. Gu Chenzhou carefully stowed the satellite phone and signal receiver, locked the safe, and slid the old picture frame back into place. The storage room once again resumed its ordinary appearance, a space cluttered with odds and ends. He lowered his head to glance at his bleeding knuckles. Expressionless, he produced a dark handkerchief and wrapped it casually around his hand, concealing the glaring spot of red. Stepping out of the storage room, he found the corridor shrouded in silence. Everyone in the villa was asleep. Like a silent phantom, he returned to his study. The overhead lights remained off. Only a reading lamp on the desk emitted a dim, yellow halo, casting his tall silhouette against the wall, twisted and immense. He did not sit. Instead, he stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the nightscape of Beicheng remained dazzling, a river of neon flowing ceaselessly. He lit a cigar. As the acrid smoke filled his lungs, the nicotine provided a temporary numbness to the surging pain in his nerve endings, rendering his thoughts even colder and sharper. Mukin Capital, Zhou Mubai. On the map of his vast commercial empire, This name had originally been nothing more than an insignificant speck. Zhou Mubai, an upstart who had made a name for himself in the venture capital world through a keen sense of smell and a bit of luck. Established less than 5 years ago, his firm had hit on a few decent internet projects, earning him a modicum of fame in Beijing's financial circles. An investment subsidiary under the Gu Group had once had peripheral business dealings with Mukin. The assessment report indicated passable potential, but an unstable foundation and extremely poor risk resilience. That very report now lay quietly in the drawer of Gu Qinzhou's desk. He recalled the conclusion given by the risk control department at the end of the report. Observation recommended. Financial investment or M&A integration may be considered at the appropriate time. M&A integration. The corner of Gu Qinzhou's mouth curled into a cruel arc. Now, he wasn't interested in integration. He wanted total destruction. He needed a perfect hurricane. A storm of annihilation crafted by his own hands, striking Mukin Capital from all directions simultaneously, leaving it defenseless and causing it to disintegrate in an instant. Step 1. Drain its blood, the capital chain. Gu Qinzhou picked up the intercom on his desk and connected to Su Ming, the CFO of the Gu Group. Despite the late hour, the phone was answered after a single ring. Su Ming's voice was lucid and steady, carrying a professional deference. Chairman Gu. Su Ming. Gu Qinzhou's voice was devoid of emotion as he issued a direct command. Identify every core LP, limited partner, of Mukin Capital immediately. I want you to leverage every connection we have. Before the market opens at 9 tomorrow morning, ensure that at least 70% of those LPs receive reliable insider information. Tell them that Genesis Tech, a key asset in Mukin Capital's investment portfolio, is suspected of major financial fraud and theft of core technology. Tell them regulators have secretly launched an investigation to be announced next week, and the stock price is facing an avalanche. Simultaneously, spread the word that Mukin Capital's own cash flow is on the verge of rupture, and that its founder, Zhou Mubai, is being targeted by regulatory authorities for involvement in multiple illicit related party transactions and funneling of interests. On the other end of the line, Su Ming audibly drew a sharp breath. As Gu Qinzhou's confidant, he was well aware of the young helmsman's thunderous methods. Yet an order this precise, ruthless, and directed straight at choking the life out of a company still shook him to the core. He raised no objections and responded immediately. Understood, Chairman Gu. I'll handle it right away. The sources will be layered and anonymous. It will be untraceable. Good. Also, Gu Qinzhou added, his tone icy. Leverage the group's maximum credit standing with the major banks. Move as fast as possible to freeze the valuation of all known collateral pledged by Mukin Capital. Pressure their partner banks to demand an early review of their loan qualifications. I want them to wake up tomorrow facing a total blockade of every financing channel. Yes, sir. Su Ming's voice was resolute. After hanging up, Gu Qinzhou walked to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a small measure of hard liquor. He didn't drink it. He merely watched the liquid swirl in the glass, his gaze unfathomable. Step 2. Destroy its skeleton, the core projects. He picked up the phone again, this time dialing Zhao Feng, the vice president of technology investment at Gu Group. Zhao Feng, contact Genesis Tech's biggest rival, Rockstone Tech, immediately. Tell them the Gu Group is willing to provide an interest-free bridge loan at 3 times the amount they require. There is only one condition. They must hold a press conference at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to publicly accuse Genesis Tech of plagiarizing their core algorithms from an undisclosed laboratory prototype, and they must submit irrefutable evidence. Tell them that the Gu Corporation's legal team will assist them throughout the entire litigation process. Zhao Feng was clearly stunned by this sudden directive. He hesitated for a moment. Chairman Gu, Genesis is Mukin Capital's flagship project. If a scandal like this really breaks. But regarding Pansure, they may not have the guts to. They will. Gu Qinzhou cut him off, his voice carrying an unquestionable authority. Tell them that the Gu Corporation will be the lead investor in their next financing round, with a stake of no less than 40%. Furthermore, hint to them that this is a directive from above. He deliberately emphasized the word above. There was silence on the other end for a few seconds before Zhao Feng's voice returned, filled with determination. I understand, Chairman Gu. I guarantee the mission will be accomplished. The third step, and the most fatal strike, internal disintegration. Gu Qinzhou pulled up an encrypted contact list on his phone, found a number labeled Deep Throat, and dialed. A husky, street-smart male voice answered quickly, sounding slightly ingratiating. Oh, Boss Gu? Calling this late? What are your orders? Old Ghost. Gu Qinzhou's voice was devoid of warmth. Mukin Capital, the core team, the CFO, the risk control director, and that special assistant of Zhou Mubai's. Before dawn, I want copies of all raw data from their computers regarding related party transactions, funneling of interests, and financial fraud. Also, all backup hard drives from Zhou Mubai's office and home. Triple the pay. Old Ghost's breathing grew noticeably heavier on the other end, followed by a chuckle. Boss Gu, you sure are generous. Don't worry, I've already scoped those guys out. They all have dirty secrets. Hard drive copies, right? Guaranteed delivery to the old place before dawn. Keep it clean. Don't leave any traces, Gu Qinzhou said coldly. Rest assured, we're professionals. Having arranged everything, Gu Qinzhou lowered his phone. He walked to the window and downed the cold liquor in his glass in one gulp. The strong alcohol burned his throat and rushed to his head, yet it only made the darkness in his eyes more concentrated. He gazed out at the sleepless city, still bustling with prosperity, the cold curve of his lips never fading. The storm had quietly formed under his precise commands and was about to make landfall. The next 24 hours would be the countdown to hell for Zhou Mubai and his teetering Mukin Capital. At 7 a.m., the pulse of Beijing's financial street had not yet fully awakened, but an invisible panic was already spreading through Mukin Capital like a plague. Zhou Mubai was startled awake by the urgent ringing of his phone. He had stayed with Su Wan in Building 7 until late the previous night, and a hangover-like exhaustion still clung to him. Irritated, he grabbed his phone. The screen displayed the face of the company's CFO, Li Chang, twisted and distorted by extreme fear. Zhou, President Zhou, it's over. It's all over. Li Chang's voice was so shrill it cracked, carrying the sound of sobbing. The LPs. Our LPs. More than 70%. 70%. They sent letters early this morning demanding early redemption. The reason is, they suspect us of serious violations and that the safety of their funds can't be guaranteed. And the banks, our three main partner banks, just notified us simultaneously that they're freezing all our credit lines. They're demanding we cover the collateral shortfall today. Otherwise, they'll initiate mandatory liquidation procedures. President Zhou, our accounts. We don't have that much cash. The cash flow is completely severed. Zhou Mubai felt a buzzing in his head, as if he had been smashed by a heavy hammer. His mind went blank in an instant. The dizziness of his hangover was replaced by a more intense panic, and cold sweat instantly soaked his pajamas. What? How is that possible? Who leaked the news? Investigate. Investigate it for me. He roared into the phone, his voice distorted by terror. I can't trace it, President Zhou. The source of the news is extremely secretive, but all the LPs received it, and the content is highly consistent. It points to Genesis fraud and your personal issues. The bank's attitude is as hard as an iron plate. They won't listen to any explanations. Li Chang was incoherent. Zhou Mubai's hands and feet were ice cold. He leaped out of bed, feeling nothing as his bare feet hit the cold floor. He rushed to his desk and turned on his computer, his trembling fingers logging into the company's internal system. On the screen, the curve representing the capital pool was plummeting like an avalanche, and glaring red alerts were flashing madly. Before he could digest this bolt from the blue, his phone began vibrating wildly again. It was the risk control director, Sun Wei. President Zhou, something terrible has happened. Panshur Technology. Panshur just held an emergency press conference. They publicly accused Genesis of plagiarizing their core algorithms. They even displayed evidence of so-called prototype code and R&D logs on the spot. The internet has already blown up. The share price of Genesis hit the limit down right at the opening, and it's still plummeting. The regulatory agencies have already sent a letter demanding an immediate suspension of trading pending investigation. Zhou Mubai's vision went dark. He stumbled back a step, clutching his desk just to keep from falling. Plagiarism? Evidence? Impossible. Genesis was his lifeblood, the core asset with the highest valuation in Mukin capital. He knew all too well where the technology for Genesis had come from. It simply couldn't withstand deep scrutiny. Pancher Technology? How dare they? Where did they get the evidence? Panic, like an icy serpent, coiled tightly around his heart. He realized this was no coincidence. This was a calculated death blow, meticulously planned against him and Mukin capital. Someone was behind this, bent on his destruction. Where is the PR department? Where is legal? Are they all dead? Issue a statement. Swipanshi. Sue them for defamation. Zhou Mubai roared hysterically into the phone. Mr. Zhou, the PR director, and the general counsel. They just submitted their resignation letters. They said they received reliable information that the company is involved in major illegal activities, and they don't want to be implicated. Sun Wei's voice was filled with despair. Boom! Zhou Mubai felt his world completely collapse. Core LPs divesting, banks calling in loans, his flagship project facing a devastating strike due to plagiarism accusations, his executive team disintegrating in an instant. It was a combination of blows, each one fatal. Who was it? Who had the power to accomplish all of this in a single night? Gu Qinzhou. The name flashed through his mind like a phantom, causing him to shudder violently. No, impossible. Suwon had said that Gu Qinzhou never suspected a thing. He forced himself to calm down, his fingers trembling as he dialed the number of a friend in the regulatory department whom he usually bribed to smooth things over. The phone rang for a long time before it was picked up. The voice on the other end was hushed, filled with impatience and a desire to distance himself. Old Joe, why are you still calling? Run. Run now. You've really kicked the hornet's nest this time. The higher-ups are furious. They've named you specifically for a strict investigation. Those things you did. Sigh, they've almost completed the entire chain of evidence against you. Take my advice. Don't struggle. Just think about your exit strategy. With that, before Zhou Mubai could react, the call was disconnected, leaving only the beeping of a busy signal. The last glimmer of luck was thoroughly snuffed out. Zhou Mubai, his face the color of dead ash, collapsed weakly onto the cold floor. It was over. It was all over. Mukin Capital was finished. Zhou Mubai was finished. Those regulatory violations, the funneling of benefits. Once verified, what awaited him was a lengthy prison sentence. Immense fear and despair drowned him like a tidal wave. He clutched his head, letting out a painful whimper like a wounded beast. Just then, his apartment doorbell rang with an extremely rhythmic, cold, and oppressive tempo. Ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong. Zhou Mubai snapped his head up like a startled bird, his bloodshot eyes staring fixedly at the heavy security door. His heart pounded wildly, threatening to burst through his chest. Who was it? Debt collectors? The police? He didn't dare open the door, but the doorbell continued to ring like a death warrant. Finally, he trembled as he climbed up and leaned into the peephole to look out. Outside stood two men in black suits with expressionless faces. They were tall, with a cold, hard aura and eyes sharp as knives. At a glance, it was clear they were not ordinary people. One of them was carrying a heavy-looking black tool case. Mr. Zhou Mubai, a voice devoid of emotion, came from outside. It wasn't loud, but clearly penetrated the door panel. Mr. Gu requests your presence. Mr. Gu. These words exploded in Zhou Mubai's ears like a clap of thunder. His last fantasy was shattered. Immense terror instantly seized him. It was Gu Qinzhou. It really was him. He knew. He knew everything. Zhou Mubai's legs turned to jelly, and he slid down against the door to sit on the floor. His trousers instantly became wet, and the stench of urine began to spread. He was done for. The men outside seemed to lose patience. One of them took out an electronic device and manipulated the lock for a few moments. With a soft click, the electronic lock, which claimed to offer top-tier security, was easily breached. The heavy door was pushed open. The two men in black walked in like messengers from hell. They ignored Zhou Mubai, who lay limp on the floor reeking of filth. One of them walked straight to his study, moving with precision and speed to dismantle his computer's hard drive and remove several backup drives from the desk drawers. The other walked up to him, looking down from above. There was not a ripple of emotion in his eyes, only cold indifference. "Take him away." He spat out the 3 words flatly, like dragging a dead dog. 2 men in black yanked the limp and incontinent Zhou Mubai from the floor, roughly hoisting him up and hauling him outside. Zhou Mubai struggled in vain, letting out terrified howls. "What are you doing? Let me go. I'm calling the police." "Gu Qinzhou. Did Gu Qinzhou send you? He's breaking the law. Breaking the law." His screams echoed through the empty stairwell, receiving no response. The men in black turned a deaf ear to his struggles and curses. Without the slightest pause, they stuffed him into an unmarked black van parked downstairs. The door slammed shut, cutting off all light and sound from the outside world. Pinned to the back seat, Zhou Mubai's teeth chattered with fear. The vehicle did not head toward the city center, but instead sped toward a massive construction site under development in the northern part of the city. Dust filled the air, machinery roared. The van came to a halt beside a relatively open pile of rubble. The door slid open. Zhou Mubai was roughly dragged out. The blinding sunlight made him squint. Then he saw a figure. Gu Qinzhou. He stood a short distance away, his back to them, his posture upright as a pine. He wore a perfectly tailored black coat, looking entirely out of place amidst the gray, dusty surroundings of the construction site. He seemed to be holding something, looking down at it. Hearing the commotion, Gu Qinzhou slowly turned around. Zhou Mubai finally saw his face clearly. On that handsome countenance, there was no trace of rage, nor even any obvious hatred. There was only a bottomless coldness and a kind of almost amused serenity. His gaze landed on Zhou Mubai as if looking at a pile of filthy trash, carrying undisguised contempt and disgust. Gu Qinzhou, what do you want?" Zhou Mubai, unnerved by that stare, shouted with false bravado, though his voice shook uncontrollably. Gu Qinzhou did not answer him. Unhurriedly, he tossed the object he was holding, a yellow hard hat covered in dust and stains, onto the muddy ground in front of Zhou Mubai. Stamped on the hat were the blurred characters for temporary worker. CEO Zhou. Gu Qinzhou finally spoke. His voice wasn't loud, yet it cut clearly through the noise of the construction site, carrying a strange, spine-chilling gentleness. "I hear your cash flow is tight lately, and you're looking for work." He took a step forward, the toe of his polished leather shoe almost touching the filthy hard hat. "Coincidentally, I have a construction site here that's short on hands." Gu Qinzhou's gaze swept over the roaring excavators and the mountains of steel and concrete, before settling back on Zhou Mubai's pale, terrified face. His lips curled into a cold, cruel arc. "Like hauling bricks?" He tilted his head slightly, his eyes assessing him like a toy about to be dismantled. "Go on, start the live stream." Before Zhou Mubai could process what live stream meant, one of the men in black stepped forward. He roughly shoved a cheap phone mount into Zhou Mubai's trembling hands and forcibly taped the phone securely to his chest. The other man picked up the hard hat from the ground and unceremoniously jammed it onto Zhou Mubai's meticulously styled hair, sending a shower of filthy dust cascading down. What are you doing?" Zhou Mubai struggled in terror, but his shoulders were pinned down by the iron grip of the man in black. Gu Qinzhou took out his own phone and tapped the screen casually a few times. Soon, a live stream room titled Mubai's Brick Hauling Daily Life quietly went live on a short video platform with massive traffic. There was no teaser, no headline, but the resources Gu Qinzhou deployed were enough to instantly push it to the home pages of countless users. On the live stream screen appeared Zhou Mubai's face, twisted by extreme fear and humiliation. His hair was messy beneath the filthy hard hat, his expensive silk pajamas were covered in mud, and the wet stain at his crotch was clearly visible on camera. The background was the dust-filled construction site and a massive pile of rubble. Within seconds, the viewer count in a live stream room skyrocketed like a rocket. The comments exploded instantly. "Holy shit, isn't this Zhou Mubai from Yukon Capital? That young talent. What's with this look? Performance art? Construction site play? Look at his pants. Did he wet himself? Ha ha. Didn't news just break that Mukin Capital is done for? Plagiarism, violations, LP withdrawal. Deserved it. Karma came fast. Which deity did he offend? No. Turn it off. Turn it off. Watching the comments scrolling at breakneck speed, filled with mockery and schadenfreude, and seeing his own unprecedentedly wretched and hideous appearance being gawked at by countless people, the immense sense of shame nearly drove Zhou Mubai insane. He desperately tried to shield the camera lens with his hand, but his wrist was firmly gripped by the man in black beside him. Gu Qinzhou remained deaf to his screams. He walked unhurriedly over to Zhou Mubai, pulled a neatly folded piece of paper from his overcoat pocket, and shook it open. It was unmistakably the results page of the paternity test. He held the paper up, displaying it clearly to the camera, while his icy voice traveled through the microphone clipped to Zhou Mubai's chest, ringing clearly throughout the entire livestream. Zhou Mubai, what did Su Wan taste? Gu Qinzhou's voice wasn't loud. It was like a poison-dipped ice pick piercing the eardrums of Zhou Mubai and every viewer. Spending my money, sleeping with my wife, raising your bastard. You enjoyed these last 5 years, didn't you? Boom! The live stream exploded. Oh my god! Huge amount of info. Gu Qinzhou? The Gu Qinzhou of the Gu Group? So one? That ballerina, Mrs. Gu? Holy SHD. Massive scandal. The kid is a bastard? Zhou Mubai's? So Mu Qian is finished because of Gu Qinzhou. Straight for the heart. This is more ruthless than just killing him. President Gu is a legend. This scumbag deserves it. Live humiliation. So satisfying. The barrage of comments drowned out the screen like a tsunami. Zhou Mubai looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face instantly went from pale to a deathly ashen gray. He stared at the report, then at the undisguised, bone-chilling hatred and vindictive pleasure in Gu Qinzhou's eyes. His last shred of dignity was utterly crushed. He realized that Gu Qinzhou didn't just want to ruin his career. He wanted to completely destroy everything that made him a man. Now, Gu Qinzhou put away the report and pointed to the ground beneath Zhou Mubai's feet, a mess of gravel and mud. His voice sounded like the whisper of a demon. Kowtow on the live stream. 100 times. And for every single one, our friends watching must hear the sound. If you miss even one, Gu Qinzhou leaned in slightly, bringing his face close to Zhou Mubai's pupils, which were dilated with fear. His voice was so soft that only the two of them could hear it, yet it carried a chill that froze the soul. I'll have your son taken out of his incubator at the hospital and thrown into the cement mixer next door. Zhou Mubai's pupils abruptly contracted to pinpoints. His son, Gu Yinan, his only son, Gu Qinzhou knew, and he was using him as leverage. An overwhelming terror completely crushed him. He didn't dare gamble on whether Gu Qinzhou was bluffing. The look in a man's eyes right now told him that he was absolutely capable of doing it. No. Please don't. Zhou Mubai let out a desperate whimper. Kowtow. Gu Qinzhou straightened up and coldly spat out the single word, like a final judgment. Under the gaze of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of eyes, amidst the flying barrage of ridicule, contempt, and morbid curiosity, forced by Gu Qinzhou's cold, knife-like stare, Zhou Mubai, the once high-spirited rising star of the business world, felt his legs give way. With a heavy thud, he felt his knees on the cold ground, thick with gravel and mud. Humiliated, he bent forward and smashed his forehead against the filthy ground. Bang! The dull sound was transmitted clearly through the microphone to the entire live stream. Mud smeared across his forehead. He straightened up, trembling, and under the silent oppression of the men in black, smashed his head down again. Bang! 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 Again and again. Each kowtow was accompanied by violent tremors of his body, while tears of humiliation mixed with mud slid down his face. Each dull impact sounded like a heavy hammer striking the hearts of the viewers. The viewer count in the live stream skyrocketed, and the comments went even wilder. Cheering, cursing, screen recording, tipping, though quickly banned by the platform. This absurd and cruel live stream became the bloodiest spectacle on the internet that day. Gu Qinzhou stood not far away, watching quietly. He watched as Zhou Mubai, like a dying dog, mechanically and desperately repeated the kowtowing motion in the mud. The dust from the construction site settled on his expensive overcoat, but he remained completely oblivious. There was no expression on his face. No anger, no excitement, only a profound, icy calm like the water in an ancient well. Yet, in the deepest depths of his eyes, a nearly destructive sense of gratification, suppressed for too long and finally unleashed, was burning silently and frantically like a dark flame, growing ever fiercer. With every dull thud of a kowtow, the flame danced a little more intensely. Suwon, can you see this? This is only the beginning. North City slums, Happiness Lane, tenement building no. 3. The air was perpetually filled with the pungent mixture of cheap cooking oil fumes, rotting garbage, and damp mold. The narrow corridors were piled high with clutter, the walls blackened by smoke, with dark red bricks exposed beneath the peeling, mottled plaster. The dim, sound-activated light flickered on and off, resembling the gasps of a dying man. It was the innermost unit on the 3rd floor, its iron door mottled with rust. Suwon curled up on the cold concrete floor, lying on nothing but a tattered straw mat that reeked of sour decay. She wore only thin undergarments. Her expensive silk lingerie had long since been frayed by the rough floor and was covered in filth. A biting chill seeped into her very marrow from all directions, making her teeth chatter and her body tremble uncontrollably. Just a few hours ago, she had been lying on a custom-made Italian velvet bed in Building A7 of Shishan Maple Woods, dreaming of the future in Zhou Mubai's arms. The next second, several phantom-like men in black had broken in, pressing cold gun muzzles against her temple and smothering her mouth and nose with a drug-soaked towel. When she woke, it was to this hellish scene. She didn't even have time to process the immense humiliation of being stripped and dumped here before she was gripped by a deeper terror. Nyenin. Where was her Nyenin? What had Gu Chinzhou done to him? Open the door. Suwon. You bitch. Open the door. The heavy iron door clanged loudly under the blows, sending dust showering down from the doorframe. A rough, ferocious male voice roared from outside. Suwon shrank back in terror, pressing her body tightly against the cold wall, her heart pounding as if it were about to burst. I know you're in there. Gu said this place has been signed over to us to cover his debt. Get the hell out here now if you know what's good for you. Another, even sleazier voice chimed in, accompanied by violent kicks against the door. It was Gu Chinzhou. He had taken this dilapidated apartment he had arranged for her and signed it directly over to loan sharks. Suwon instantly understood his intention. He wanted to strip away her last shred of dignity, plunging her into an abyss of debt collection, humiliation, and total subjugation. I don't have any money. This place isn't mine. Suwon screamed hoarsely through her tears, her voice distorted by fear. Not yours? Your name is on the IOU in black and white. Suwon, if you don't open this door, I'm breaking it down. The men outside clearly didn't believe her. The pounding grew frantic, and the iron door groaned under the unbearable strain. Just as Suwon despaired, thinking they would break through at any second, the pounding stopped eerily. Low, hushed voices could be heard outside, laced with deference. All right, got it. We're leaving now. Don't worry, Mr. Gu. The voice was obsequious and fearful. The footsteps faded away. The hallway returned to a deathly silence. Suwon collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, cold sweat soaking her tattered undergarments. Was it Gu Chinzhou's doing? Had he deliberately sent loan sharks to terrorize her, only to call them off at the last moment? Just to witness her in this state of abject terror and groveling desperation. The immense humiliation and fear almost tore her apart. She hugged her knees, burying her head deep between them, her body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Gu Chinzhou's revenge was far colder, more precise, and more psychologically manipulative than she had ever imagined. Hunger, like an invisible hand, clenched her stomach tightly. She hadn't had a drop of water since her kidnapping yesterday. Her throat was parched and burning, and her empty stomach cramped in waves of pain. She raised her head and looked around this foul-smelling home that was less than 10 square meters. Aside from the tattered mat beneath her, there was only a broken, three-legged wooden table in the corner. On it sat a chipped porcelain bowl containing some moldy paste left over from who knew when. Money. She needed money. She needed food. She needed clothes. She needed to save her Nyenin. Suddenly, she remembered her bag. Her phone, bank cards, ID. She struggled to crawl to the door and peered through the crack. The hallway outside was empty and filthy. Her designer handbag had been discarded like trash on the dirty concrete floor outside the door. With trembling hands, she carefully opened the door crack and snatched the bag inside. Her heart pounded with excitement. She unzipped it with shaking hands. Empty. Phone, wallet, all her IDs, jewelry. Everything was gone. Only a few crumpled tissues and a half-used lipstick remained. Her last shred of hope was extinguished. Suwon's vision went black, and she nearly fainted. Gu Chenzhou wouldn't even leave her this. He wanted her to have absolutely nothing, to make her struggle for survival like a rat in the gutter. Just then, that old phone with the shattered screen suddenly started vibrating. The buzzing sound was piercing in the dead silence of the room. Suwon lunged for it, as if grabbing at a lifeline. It was her spare phone, hidden in a secret compartment of the bag. It had actually gone undiscovered. 2 words flashed on the screen. Mubai. Zhou Mubai. He was still alive. He would surely have a way to save her. To save Nyenin. Mubai. Mubai. Is it you? Suwon practically screamed into the phone, her voice hoarse and choked with sobs. Save me. Gu Chenzhou threw me into the slums. He knows. He knows everything. Nyenin. I don't know where Nyenin is. Hurry. Wan. The voice from the other end was weak and raspy, carrying a despair and agony akin to impending death. It instantly extinguished all of Suwon's agitation. I can't save you. No one can save us. What do you mean, Mubai? What happened to you? Where are you? Suwon's heart sank to rock bottom. I'm at the construction site. Zhou Mubai's voice was broken, punctuated by violent coughing and suppressed groans of pain. Gu Chenzhou, he isn't human. He's a devil. A live stream. Kowtowing. 100 times. My legs. My knees. Crushed. A live stream? Kowtowing? 100 times? Knees crushed. Suwon's head buzzed. She couldn't fathom what Zhou Mubai had endured. Wan, listen to me. Zhou Mubai's voice suddenly grew urgent, filled with absolute terror. He has people watching me. He wanted me to tell you. Every penny under your name is being used to support you and the bastard's father. What? Suwon felt as though she had been struck by lightning. He said, that money, the money you transferred to my name, he froze it long ago. Every single cent was used for Mukin Capital, used to support me and Nyenin. Zhou Mubai's voice choked with tears. He's using our own money to keep us alive, only to destroy us with his own hands. He's playing with us. Wan, he's playing us to death. Boom! Suwon felt the world spin around her. The money in her name? The massive fund she thought she had secretly transferred to Zhou Mubai to build their future life. The money from selling jewelry. The money Gu Chenzhou gave her, the private stash she had secretly saved. It had all been under Gu Chenzhou's surveillance the entire time. He was like a cold-hearted spectator, watching them act like clowns, using the money he dispensed to build a sandcastle destined to collapse. He also said, Zhou Mubai's voice was filled with boundless fear and despair. If Nyenin gets sick and needs a blood transfusion, do not go to him, because... Suddenly, a scream so shrill it didn't sound human came from the other end of the line. It was followed by the dull thud of a heavy impact and muffled shouting. Mubai! Mubai! Suwon screamed frantically into the phone, her heart almost stopping. The call was brutally disconnected, leaving only the cold, busy signal. Suwon clutched the phone, her body freezing cold. Like a statue with its soul extracted, she slumped onto the cold, filthy ground. Gu Chenzhou's words echoed in her ears like the most vicious curse. Every penny under your name is being used to support you and the bastard's father. If Nyenin gets sick and needs a blood transfusion, do not go to him. In the cruelest way possible, he had severed every lifeline for her and Zhou Mubai, and even severed her very last hope for her son. He didn't just want them ruined and destitute. He wanted them to tear each other apart in despair, watching their only hope, their son, slowly wither away in agony. A bone-chilling cold shot from the soles of her feet to the top of her head, 100 times colder than the slums. Soo-won curled up in the corner. Her tattered lingerie offered no protection against the cold, and certainly no protection against the fear and despair rising from the depths of her soul, the realization that she was being utterly toyed with. Gu Chinzhou's revenge was not a violent storm, but rather casting her into a bottomless, freezing pool, forcing her to feel the despair of approaching death, inch by inch, amidst the cold, darkness, and suffocation. And this was only the beginning. Life in the happiness lane, no. Three-tenement building became a torture akin to sawing flesh with a dull knife. Soo-won lived like a walking corpse, clinging to life by scavenging rancid food scraps from trash cans and drinking muddy tap water from the communal pipe. Her tattered lingerie was filthy, barely covering her body. The lone sharks hadn't returned, but Soo-won knew this was merely the calm before the storm. Gu Chinzhou was enjoying watching her struggle like an ant. She had tried to escape. She would sneak out of the tenement late at night, try to run back to the Soo family for help, or at least find a payphone. But no matter which secluded alley she took, she would always run into a man in a black jacket leaning against a wall, smoking, right at the corner. The man wouldn't speak. He would just stare at her coldly with emotionless eyes, as if watching a bug trying to crawl out of a glass jar. After a few attempts, Soo-won fell into utter despair. She was like a trapped beast locked in a transparent cage, while Gu Chinzhou stood outside, watching her every futile struggle with keen interest. Her only solace was that spare phone with the shattered screen. She guarded it, as if it were the last remaining spark of fire. Only late at night did she dare to turn on for a few seconds in the corner, frantically dialing Zhou Mubai's number that would never connect again, or calling Gun Yinin's kindergarten teacher, who had long since blocked her, or the Soo family home, which was forever busy or went unanswered. Every busy signal was like a small knife, gouging another piece of flesh from her heart, which was already riddled with wounds. The only thought keeping her alive was Yinin, her son, the flesh of her own flesh. No matter how much Gu Chinzhou hated her, surely Yinin was still of the Gu bloodline? Even a tiger does not eat its own cubs. Would he, for the child's sake? A faint sliver of hope, one she couldn't even believe herself, flickered in her heart like a dying candle in the wind. However, on the seventh night, this faint light was completely snuffed out. The phone screen suddenly lit up in the darkness, emitting a blinding glare. It wasn't a call, but an anonymous MMS dot. Trembling, Soo-won opened it. A photograph. The background of the photo was unmistakably the top private children's hospital in Beicheng, the very VIP ward where Yinin had stayed during a previous fever. On the bed lay a tiny figure. It was Gun Yinin. His eyes were tightly closed, his small face flushed red with fever, his lips dry and cracked. His little chest heaved rapidly, and several tubes were inserted into his body, connected to blinking machines beside him. He looked so small, so fragile, like a candle flame ready to go out at any moment. Beneath the photo was a short line of cold text. Viral myocarditis, complicated by acute renal failure. Rh-negative blood. Urgent need for exchange, transfusion, and dialysis. Sender. Good Samaritan. Buzz. Soo-won's mind went blank. All her blood instantly rushed to her head, then froze into ice the very next second. Myocarditis. Kidney failure. Rh-negative blood. The rare panda blood. Yinin. Her Yinin was critically ill. He needed a blood exchange. He needed Rh-negative blood. But Gu Chinzhou's blood type was AB, Rh positive. He couldn't save Yinin at all. That paternity test report was like a red-hot branding iron, searing itself into her memory. Gu Chinzhou was not Yinin's biological father. Not only would he not save him, he even... Soo-won suddenly remembered the message Gu Chinzhou had asked Zhou Mubai to pass on. If Yinin gets sick and needs a transfusion, do not come to me. He did it on purpose. He knew this day would come. He was waiting to watch Yinin die. Enormous fear and despair swallowed Soo-won like a tsunami. She opened her mouth wide like a dying fish, yet could make no sound, only a raspy gasping from her throat. The phone slipped from her cold, stiff hands and hit the icy concrete floor with a clatter. The cracks on the screen spread in the darkness, just like her completely shattered world at that moment. No, she couldn't. She couldn't watch Nyenin die. He was her life. The only reason she kept living. Rh-negative blood. Rh-negative blood. Suwon's mind spun frantically. She herself was type A, Rh positive. Zhou Mubai. What was Zhou Mubai's blood type? She desperately tried to recall. It seemed it was type O, Rh. Rh what? She didn't know. She had never asked. And Zhou Mubai's fate was currently unknown. She didn't even know where he was. Even if she found him, could his blood be used? An immense sense of helplessness nearly crushed her. Like a madwoman, she threw herself onto the ground, groping to pick up the phone. The screen was shattered, but it still lit up. With trembling hands, she typed Rh-negative blood Beicheng into the search bar. The information that popped up made her even more desperate. Extremely rare, blood banks constantly in shortage, matching difficulty for non-immediate family members extremely high. Only hope burst like a soap bubble. No, there was one more person, a person she had deliberately forgotten, even resented for years. Her mother, Suwon's biological mother, a woman who had abandoned her and her father when she was very young to run away with another man. Suwon vaguely remembered that woman seemed to have that extremely rare Rh-negative blood. This thought was like the last glimmer of light in the darkness. As if clutching at a straw to save her life, Suwon began to scroll frantically on the broken screen. She remembered that many years ago, that woman seemed to have tried to contact her and sent a text message. She had saved the number casually under the contact name that woman. Found it. A name dormant at the very bottom of her contact list. That woman. Suwon's fingers trembled violently from agitation and the cold. She could barely hold the phone. She dialed the number. The long ringing tone. Every sound was like a heavy hammer striking her heart. Just when she thought no one would answer, the call connected. A woman's voice, thick with an accent, slightly aged and impatient, came through. Hello? Who is this? Ma, it's me, Wan. Suwon's voice was as hoarse as sandpaper rubbing together. There was silence on the other end for fully 10 seconds or more. Then, the voice turned cold and distant. Suwon, you have a wrong number. I don't have a daughter. Saying this, she was about to hang up. Mom, don't hang up. Please. Save your grandson. Save Nyenin. Suwon screamed with all her might. Her voice choked with sobs and desperate pleading. He's dying. He needs Rh-negative blood. Only you can save him. Please. Mom, I beg you. For the sake of the blood flowing in my veins that comes from you. Save him. He's innocent. The other end of the line fell into dead silence again. Suwon's heart was in her throat. Her fingernails dug deep into her palms, drawing blood, yet she felt no pain. After a few agonizingly long seconds, that cold voice spoke again, laced with a trace of imperceptible complexity. Rh-negative blood? Which hospital is he in? Sacred Heart. Beicheng Sacred Heart Children's Hospital. VIP Ward number 3. Mom, please come quickly. I beg you. Suwon was sobbing uncontrollably. Got it. The other party spat out these words coldly and hung up the phone. Suwon clutched the phone and slumped to the ground, tears gushing out and mixing with the grime on her face. She didn't know if that woman would come, didn't know if she still hated her. But this was her last ray of hope. She had to go to the hospital. She had to stay by Nyenin's side. She had to see with her own eyes that woman coming to save her son. This thought gave her infinite strength. She struggled to her feet and rushed out of that hellish cage regardless of everything. Barefoot, wearing only her tattered underwear, she charged down the dark, filthy stairs like a mad woman and into the biting, bone-chilling night of Beicheng's winter. The cold wind sliced against her exposed skin like knives, freezing her until she almost lost all sensation. The soles of her feet were cut by the cold, rough ground and gravel, leaving behind spots of blood. Pedestrians on the road looked askance, pointing at this ragged, crazy-looking woman and avoiding her like the plague. Taxis, seeing her in this state, sped away even faster. Suwon couldn't care about anything else. She had only one thought. Run. Run to Sacred Heart Hospital. Run to her Nyenin's side. She didn't know how long she ran or how many times she fell. When she finally saw the familiar, brightly lit building of Sacred Heart Hospital. The horizon was already turning the pale white of dawn. Her body was cold and numb, her lips frozen purple, and the soles of her feet were a bloody mess, leaving a bloody footprint with every step. She staggered towards the entrance of the VIP inpatient department, but was blocked by two uniformed security guards, as if they were driving away a beggar. Get lost. Where did this crazy woman come from? This isn't a place for you. A security guard shouted with a look of disgust. My son is inside. Gu Nyenin, let me in. I want to see my son. Su Wan cried hoarsely, desperately trying to rush in. Young Master Gu? Your son. The guard looked like he had heard the biggest joke in the world. He looked her up and down with contemptuous eyes. You? Young Master Gu is your son? I think you've gone crazy trying to climb the social ladder. Get lost now, or we're calling the police. I really am his mother. Let me in, please. Su Wan begged in despair, tears flowing down mixed with blood and dirt. The scuffling and crying disturbed those inside. A well-dressed, stern-faced, middle-aged female doctor walked out. It was Nyenin's attending physician, Director Chun. Seeing Su Wan in this state, her brows furrowed tightly. A trace of complex emotion flashed in her eyes. There was pity, but mostly indifference. M.A.S.A. Su. Director Chin's voice was cold. Dr. Chun, it's me. How is Nyenin? Have you found the Rh-negative blood? My mom. Has she come? Su Wan lunged before Director Chun, like she was grasping at the last straw. Director Chun took a step back to avoid her filthy hands, her tone strictly businesslike. Young Master Gu is in critical condition and is undergoing emergency treatment. As for the blood source, she paused, looked at Su Wan's hopeful eyes, and slowly shook her head. I regret to inform you that we have contacted every available blood bank and rare blood type volunteer organization, but currently, we have not found a matching Rh-negative blood source. What? Su Wan felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her body swayed, barely able to stand. How could you not find it? My mom promised me she would come. No blood donor by that name has come. Director Chen interrupted her, her voice icy. Furthermore, Ms. Su, to be blunt, Rh-negative blood is extremely rare. The success rate from matches outside of immediate family is incredibly low. Even if your mother were here, she might not be able to. No, she definitely can. She is Rh-negative. She is my birth mother. Su Wan cut her off hysterically. Director Chun watched her in silence. The pity in her eyes vanished, replaced by a calm that bordered on cruel. Ms. Su, the most important thing right now is to save the child. Mr. Gu is on his way. I believe that as the child's father, he will make the decision that is in the child's best interest. Father. Su Wan let out a shrill laugh, filled with endless despair and mockery. What kind of father is he? He won't save Nyenin. He wishes Nyenin were dead. Just then, the sound of steady, cold footsteps echoed from the end of the corridor. It was like the Grim Reaper sounding a death knell. Su Wan whipped her head around. Gu Chinzhou. He was clad in a perfectly tailored dark gray cashmere coat, his figure tall and straight, his gait unhurried. There was no anxiety or sorrow on his face, only a profound, heart-palpitating calmness. Behind him followed two assistants and a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. A lawyer, perhaps? He walked straight up to Director Chun and nodded slightly. Director Chun, what is the situation? His voice was deep and steady, betraying not a single ripple of emotion. Mr. Gu, Director Chun immediately adopted a respectful yet worried tone. The young master's condition is not optimistic. He has acute renal failure and urgently requires a blood exchange and dialysis. However, regarding the Rh-negative blood source, we are still doing our utmost to locate one. It is just that. Gu Chinzhou nodded, his gaze finally shifting to Su Wan. When his eyes landed on her, Su Wan felt as though she had been stripped naked and cast into a world of ice and snow. All her filth, wretchedness, and humiliation were laid bare, with nowhere to hide. He looked at her, his eyes holding no anger, no hatred, only a kind of extreme indifference and detachment, as if he were looking at a piece of disgusting trash that had nothing to do with him. Su Wan felt chilled to the bone by his stare, but the instinct to save her son overrode all fear. She lunged forward, trying to grab Gu Chinzhou's arm, but was expressionlessly blocked by one of the assistants behind him. Gu Qinzhou. Su-Wan's voice was sharp and distorted with despair. Take my blood. I'm type A. Even if it's not a match, we can try. Or take yours. You're type AB. It's better than nothing. I beg you. Save Nianin. He is your son. He has called you daddy for 5 years. You can't just watch him die. She screamed herself hoarse, tears streaming down her face, begging bitterly. Gu Qinzhou listened quietly to her cries, his face devoid of expression. Only when Su-Wan's voice had gone hoarse did he slowly raise his hand. The lawyer behind him immediately retrieved a document from his briefcase and respectfully placed it in his hand. Gu Qinzhou accepted the document and flipped it open with elegant movements. Su-Wan's gaze was instantly transfixed. It was that paternity test report. Gu Qinzhou's long, slender finger pointed precisely to the glaring black text in the conclusion section of the report. Then, he looked up at Su-Wan, his eyes like permafrost, while the corner of his mouth curved into an almost imperceptible, yet bone-chillingly cold arc. His voice was not loud, yet it clearly cut through Su-Wan's despairing wails, ringing through the deathly silent hospital corridor like a final, bloody judgment. It's a pity. His blood type. Gu Qinzhou's gaze swept over the report, moved slowly to the tightly closed doors of the emergency room, and finally settled on Su-Wan's face, which was twisted in despair. Enunciating every word with absolute clarity, he said, "Has absolutely nothing to do with me." The words, "nothing to do with me," were like ice picks dipped in deadly poison, stabbing ruthlessly into Su-Wan's heart, instantly freezing her blood and stopping her breath. The blood drained completely from her face. Her body swayed, and she fell straight backward. Thud! The back of her head struck the cold, smooth marble floor of the hospital, making a dull sound. Darkness swam before her eyes, filled with dancing stars. The intense pain and the despair that penetrated to her very marrow left her unable to even groan. She could only open her mouth in vain like a fish out of water, making ragged, gasping sounds. Gu Qinzhou withdrew his gaze indifferently, as if what lay on the ground was merely a pile of unsightly trash. He turned to Director Chun, whose face had gone pale and who held her breath in fear, speaking in a tone that was terrifyingly calm. "Director Chun, do what you can. Do not worry about the costs." He paused, then added a sentence, his voice carrying a chilling implication that made one shudder. "However, all treatment must be strictly limited to what is permitted by law and medical ethics. Do you understand?" Director Chun shuddered, immediately understanding Gu Qinzhou's subtext. They could do their best, but they were absolutely not to use any unconventional means to save the child, especially if it involved Gu Qinzhou himself. She lowered her head, her voice strained. "Yes, Mr. Gu, we understand." Gu Qinzhou looked at no one else. He turned and walked away with steady, measured strides. The sound of his leather shoes striking the marble floor was crisp and cold, sounding like hammer blows upon Su-Wan's dying heart, gradually fading into the distance. The assistant and lawyer he brought followed closely behind, leaving a dead silent corridor and Su-Wan, who had collapsed on the floor like a broken rag doll. At Director Chen's signal, a few nurses cautiously approached, intending to help Su-Wan up. But Su-Wan felt as if all her bones had been removed. She lay limp on the ground, her empty eyes staring at the glaring red light above the emergency room. Tears surged out silently, mixing with the blood flowing from where she had scraped her forehead, tracing trails of despair down her dirty face. "Nianin, my Nianin." A broken whimper escaped her throat, like the final wail of a wounded beast. Gu Qinzhou's coldness had thoroughly crushed her last shred of illusion. He didn't just want them to suffer a fate worse than death. He wanted her to watch helplessly as her own flesh and blood marched towards destruction in agony. Time became viscous and drawn out in her despair. Every minute and every second felt like suffering in a pot of boiling oil. Su-Wan didn't know how long she had lain on the floor until the emergency room doors were pushed open. Director Chen walked out looking exhausted and removed her mask. As if electrocuted, Su-Wan struggled violently to lift her head. Her bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at the doctor, filled with a final, abject plea. Director Chen avoided her gaze and sighed, her tone heavy and formulaic. Ms. Su, I am very sorry. We did our best. Acute kidney failure triggered multiple organ failure, coupled with the inability to replenish the rare blood type in time. Little Gu Nianen, at 5:47 a.m., failed to respond to resuscitation and was pronounced dead. Boom! It felt as though something had completely exploded inside Su Wan's brain, blown to smithereens. The world instantly lost all sound and color, leaving only boundless, all-consuming darkness and dead silence. She stared blankly at Director Chen's mouth opening and closing, but she could no longer hear a sound. Resuscitation failed. Dead. Her Nianen was dead. The Nianen who would call her mama in a milky baby voice, who would open his little hands wanting a hug, who would giggle and throw himself in her arms, was dead. Just because of her betrayal all those years ago. Just because of Gu Qinzhou's cold-blooded revenge. A massive void swallowed her in an instant. No crying, no struggling. She simply fell straight back, like a piece of lifeless deadwood, smashing heavily onto the floor once more. This time, she lost consciousness completely. The world plunged into a void of darkness. When she regained consciousness, the first thing Su Wan smelled was the strong, pungent scent of disinfectant. She struggled to open her heavy eyelids. What came into view was a strange, pale white ceiling and an iron stand holding in 4 drip. A hospital? Not the luxury of the Sacred Heart Hospital VIP ward, but the shabbiness of a standard ward. She moved slightly, and pain shot through her whole body as if she had been taken apart and put back together, especially at the back of her head and the soles of her feet. Awake! A cold female voice sounded from the side. Su Wan laboriously turned her eyes and saw a middle-aged policewoman in uniform with a stern face standing by the bed, holding a notebook. Su Wan, the policewoman confirmed. Su Wan nodded blankly, her throat too dry to make a sound. I am Officer Lin from the Municipal Criminal Investigation Detachment. The policewoman opened her notebook, her voice devoid of any emotion. You disturbed public order at Sacred Heart Hospital, causing a negative impact, and are suspected of the crime of abandonment and attempted child abuse resulting in death. Due to the child's ultimate death, this requires further investigation. Abandonment? Abuse? Resulting in death? Su Wan's chaotic brain couldn't process these words at all. She only remembered Nianen. Nianen was dead. My child! She hoarsely squeezed out a few words, tears surging once again. Officer Lin frowned and spoke in a businesslike manner. Regarding the unfortunate passing of little Gu Nianen, we express our deep regrets. However, the preliminary forensic identification indicates the main cause of death was multiple organ failure triggered by acute kidney failure, directly linked to the insufficient supply of the rare blood type. As for whether there were other human factors involved, we need to wait for a more detailed autopsy report and investigation results. She paused and looked at Su Wan. Currently, as the child's legal guardian and a major suspect, in accordance with relevant laws, we must place you under criminal detention pending further investigation. Criminal detention? Su Wan listened numbly. Her heart was dead, so the whereabouts of her body made no difference to her anymore. With Nianen gone, the very meaning of her existence had vanished completely. Gu Qinzhou, he really was ruthless to the bitter end, even paving the way for her to go to prison. The policewoman signaled the nurse beside her to remove the 4-needle from Su Wan's hand. 2 tall male officers walked in and, with expressionless faces, placed cold handcuffs on her wrists. Get up. Come with us, Officer Lin ordered. Like a marionette, Su Wan was hoisted up by her arms by the 2 officers and dragged, stumbling, off the hospital bed. As her feet touched the ground, the raw, worn wounds on her soles sent piercing pain shooting through her, yet she felt nothing. She wore the oversized hospital gown provided by the facility. It hung loosely on her, making her appear even more skeletal and emaciated. She was led out of the ward and through the long hospital corridors filled with the smell of disinfectant. Occasionally, patients or their families cast curious or scornful glances her way. She kept her head down, her messy long hair obscuring her face, looking like a shell without a soul. The police car was parked right at the hospital entrance. She was shoved into the back seat. The moment the door slammed shut, it cut off everything from the outside world. The police car started up and merged into the morning traffic. Suwon leaned against the cold window, staring blankly at the streetscape flying backward outside. The bustling metropolis, the teeming crowds, none of it had anything to do with her anymore. Her world was reduced to ashes and ruins. Images flashed uncontrollably through her mind. Gu Qinzhou's cold eyes, the scene of Zhou Mubai kowtowing in the mud in despair, Nianen's pale and fragile little face on the sickbed. Finally freezing on the moment, Gu Qinzhou held up that paternity test report and said unrelated, with that cruel and vindictive curve of his lips. Did she hate? She did. A monstrous hatred surged like magma in the depths of her dead heart. Did she regret? She did. Bone-deep regret gnawed at every inch of her soul. But more than that, there was endless despair and emptiness. She had lost. She had lost completely and utterly, left with nothing. Even her only flesh and blood had been stripped away. The police car drove into the heavily guarded detention center. High walls, electric fences, and cold iron gates slowly opened, then closed heavily behind her with a heart-stopping clang. She was taken into a cramped holding room for registration, mugshots, and inspection. The cold handcuffs were exchanged for even heavier leg irons. The moment those heavy metal shackles locked around her slender ankles, Suwon's body trembled violently. She knew that the final stretch of her life would come to an end within this cold cage, amidst endless darkness and regret. And Gu Qinzhou, the man who had created this living hell, was likely standing at the pinnacle of power right now, looking down on the masses and savoring the fine wine of successful revenge and supreme pleasure, wasn't he? This thought, like a final poisoned thorn, pierced deep in her already numb heart, bringing a sharp yet desperate ache. At the Beijing No. 1 detention center, thick iron doors shut out all sound and light from the outside world. Inside the high walls, a different set of rules applied. Suwon was roughly shoved into a narrow, gloomy cell. A pungent odor, a mixture of sweat, mold, and cheap disinfectant, assaulted her senses. 7 or 8 women were already confined in the cell, all wearing identical gray-blue prison uniforms. Their gazes shot toward the newcomer, Suwon, like searchlights, filled with scrutiny, indifference, and above all, undisguised malice and gloating. "Yo, new here? What you in for?" A stout woman with a scar on her face, nicknamed Sister Scar, was the first to speak. Her voice was raspy and thick with street slang. She was the boss of this cell. Suwon kept her head lowered and remained silent. Immense grief and despair had rendered her unresponsive to her surroundings. "Cat got your tongue?" Another woman, tall and thin with a mean look in her eyes, nicknamed Bamboo Pole, sneered and stepped forward to give Suwon a hard shove. Suwon stumbled and crashed into the cold wall, aggravating the wound on the back of her head and causing a burst of agonizing pain. "Look at this soft, tender skin. Must have been a rich wife before." Sister Scar walked over, her rough fingers unceremoniously gripping Suwon's chin and forcing her to lift her head. The undried tear tracks on Suwon's face, the bruise on her forehead, and the heavy shackles on her ankles were exposed to everyone's view. This TSK, wearing heavy shackles, too, must have committed quite the crime. Bambo por exclame dramatically. "I heard. She killed her own son for the sake of a bastard child." A short, stout woman in the corner, nicknamed the informant, whispered, her voice laced with malicious excitement. "What? Killed her own son?" The cell instantly erupted in commotion. The look in the female prisoner's eyes as they stared at Suwon instantly shifted from indifference to extreme disgust and contempt. In the twisted microcosm of prison, betrayal, theft, and even violent crimes might find some measure of understanding. But killing one's own flesh and blood, especially for the sake of some illicit lover, was absolutely the lowest, most reviled of crimes. Damn it, even a vicious tiger won't eat its own cubs. This bitch is worse than an animal. Ferocity gleamed in Sister Scar's eyes as she violently shoved Suwon's chin away, then wiped her hand on Suwon's tattered hospital gown in disgust. "Exactly. A slut like this is just a waste of air. Sisters, Give her a proper welcome. Let her learn the rules around here. Yeah, teach her a lesson. Let's get some justice for that poor kid. The female inmates, roused to indignation, surrounded her while cracking their knuckles. They needed an outlet, and this newcomer who had killed her own child was undoubtedly the perfect target. Soo-won was shoved and stumbled onto the cold, hard concrete floor. Fists and kicks rained down on her body and head. She curled up like a dying shrimp, offering no resistance, not even uttering a cry of pain. The physical pain was nothing compared to the despair in her heart. These beatings and insults were merely the appetizers in the hell Gu Chinzhou had arranged for her. All right, enough. Don't hit her face. Save some energy so we can properly attend to her tonight. Sister Scar shouted to stop them, a cruel smile playing on her lips. The inmates roared with knowing laughter, their eyes fixing on Soo-won with predatory malice. Soo-won, racked with pain from the beating, curled up in the corner like a pile of mud. The cold, heavy shackles on her ankles cut painfully in her flesh. The dim light in the cell blurred in her vision. She closed her eyes, and Yenin's pale little face floated before her, along with a look of cold satisfaction in Gu Chinzhou's eyes. After an unknown amount of time, the small window on the iron door slid open. A prison guard shouted expressionlessly, "Soo-won, you have a visitor." A visitor? Who would come to see her? Soo-won was hauled up in a daze and stumbled after the guard toward the visitation room. Cold glass separated the inside from the outside. When Soo-won saw the person sitting on the other side of the glass, her pupils constricted violently. It was Gu Chinzhou's assistant, Wang Zheng, the man who was always expressionless and efficiently executed every one of Gu Chinzhou's orders. Wang Zheng, dressed in an immaculate suit, looked at Soo-won through the glass. Her hair was disheveled, her face black and blue, and she wore an oversized prison uniform with heavy shackles on her ankles, looking as wretched as the filthiest beggar. Wang Zheng's eyes were devoid of emotion, holding only a businesslike indifference. He picked up the phone receiver, and his voice came through clearly. Without any pleasantries, he went straight to the point. "Ms. Soo, Mr. Gu has a few words he wants me to convey to you." Soo-won's heart sank to rock bottom. Gu Chinzhou, he still wouldn't let her go. After she had lost everything and was trapped in prison, he still sent his dog to continue tearing at her bloody wounds. First, Wang Zheng's voice was completely flat regarding the handling of Gun Yenin's remains. For the sake of the bond formed from the boy calling him dad for a few years, Mr. Gu has made proper arrangements. He has been buried in Beishan Cemetery. As for the exact location, you do not need to know. Soo-won's body began to tremble violently as tears slid silently down her face. Her Yenin, she couldn't even see him one last time. Second, Wang Zheng continued, his tone icy, regarding Mr. Zhou Mubai. He accidentally fell from some scaffolding at a construction site, resulting in severe spinal damage and high-level paraplegia. Furthermore, the police detected a high concentration of narcotics in his system. Currently, he has been sent to the 3rd Suburban Psychiatric Hospital for compulsory treatment. Since he has no immediate family and is involved in drug use and endangering public safety, he will receive treatment there for the rest of his life. Boom! Soo-won felt a chill shoot from the soles of her feet straight to the top of her head. Zhou Mubai, paralyzed? Drugs? A mental asylum? For life? This was absolutely no accident. It was Gu Chinzhou. He had orchestrated it all. He wanted to turn Zhou Mubai into a complete invalid, leaving him to spend the rest of his life in a madhouse, living a wretched existence that was neither human nor ghost. Ignoring Soo-won's deathly pale face and trembling body, Wang Zheng delivered the final and most fatal point. Third, and most importantly, Mr. Gu has instructed me to inform you that, based on a series of serious offenses, including your marital infidelity, the illicit transfer of marital assets, and the suspected abandonment and abuse of a child, Gun Yenin, resulting in death, Mr. Gu has formally filed for divorce. He has also applied for property preservation and compensation. Given that you are currently under criminal detention, the court will proceed with the trial in absentia. The chain of evidence provided by Mr. Gu is flawless, including intimate photos of you and Zhou Mubai, financial transaction records, and that paternity test report. According to the lawyer's assessment, Not only will you leave the marriage with nothing, but you will also face enormous compensation and an extended prison sentence likely to be stacked due to the charges of abandonment and abuse. Wang Zheng set down the intercom receiver, looking at Su Wan on the other side of the glass, who looked as if her very soul had been drained away. He added one final sentence, his voice carrying a trace of imperceptible coldness, the kind that belongs to a victor. Mr. Gu asked me to convey a message, stay alive. Only by living can you slowly come to understand what it means, when living is worse than dying. Having said his piece, Wang Zheng stood up, adjusted his suit, and without sparing Su Wan another glance, turned and strode away. His retreating figure was upright and callous. Su Wan sat dazed on the cold chair, still clutching the receiver. Wang Zheng's words were like red-hot dull knives, repeatedly slicing through her already shattered nerves. Nianin was dead, buried somewhere unknown to her. Zhou Mubai was ruined, rotting away in an asylum. Her reputation was destroyed. She had nothing left. She was imprisoned, and she faced a mountain of debt and an even longer sentence. And Gu Qinzhou, he had won completely and utterly. He had taken everything from her, destroyed everyone she cared about, and then told her, stay alive and live a life worse than death. An immense despair, like a dark, bottomless quagmire, completely swallowed her. She didn't even have the strength left to hate. All that remained was a boundless, freezing, suffocating void. She was roughly hauled up by the prison guard and marched back to her cell. The heavy shackles dragged along the ground, making a clanking sound that tolled like a death knell. The cell door clanged shut behind her. Sister Scar and a gaggle of female inmates, wearing malicious, savage grins, surrounded her once again. Yo, the little bitch is back? Did your lover come to visit? Did he whisper sweet nothings? Bamboo Pole laughed with mocking sarcasm. Look at that corpse-like face of hers. Clearly, he didn't say anything good. Another woman spat. Sisters, it's a long night. Sister Scar licked her lips, her eyes glinting with cruelty and lewdness. Let's help our newcomer here. Alleviate her boredom. Let's make sure she never forgets the rules of this place as long as she lives. The inmates roared with laughter, pouncing like a pack of hungry wolves upon a helpless lamb. Filthy hands reached towards Su Wan's tattered prison uniform. Su Wan did not struggle, nor did she cry out. Like an empty shell devoid of a soul, she let those dirty hands tear at her, scratch her, and leave marks of humiliation upon her. Her hollow eyes stared up at the single, tiny barred window high in the cell. Outside lay the gray, overcast sky of Beicheng. There was no light, only an endless, eternal haze that stretched as far as the eye could see. Her life, much like the sky outside the window, had plunged into an eternal night. The cage named a fate worse than death, crafted for her by Gu Qinzhou, had only just begun. And in this eternal night, even hatred seemed pale and superfluous. The top floor of the Gu Corporation headquarters, a massive curved floor-to-ceiling window, like the eye of God, took in the full panoramic splendor of Beicheng below. It was the hour when the city lights first came on. Countless neon lights outlined the silhouette of this steel forest, and traffic flowed like golden rivers winding through the streets. This was the pinnacle of power, a vantage point from which to look down upon the masses. Gu Qinzhou stood alone before the window. He had shed the constraining suit jacket of the day and wore only a high-quality black velvet shirt. The collar was casually unbuttoned, revealing the cold, hard lines of his collarbone. He held a glass of whiskey in his hand. The amber liquid swirled gently in the crystal-clear glass, refracting the dazzling lights from outside. The main lights in the room were off. Only a few ambient lights in the corners emitted a dim glow, casting his tall, upright shadow long across the floor that shone like a mirror. The air was permeated with the rich aroma of top-tier cigars and the biting scent of whiskey. Absolute silence. There was only the incredibly faint hum of the climate control system. He tilted his head back slightly and took a sip from the glass. The spicy, mellow liquid slid down his throat, bringing a burning sensation, yet strangely leaving him with a cold clarity and unparalleled satisfaction. The screen of the encrypted satellite phone on the table lit up, and a text message popped up silently. Target A. Su Wan in custody as planned. heavily shackled. Cell arrangements settled. Special care will continue. Divorce proceedings and compensation protocols initiated. Chain of evidence complete. Expected cumulative sentence exceeds 15 years. Target B. Zhou Mubai, comminuted fracture of L1, L3 vertebrae with complete spinal cord injury. High-level paraplegia confirmed. Positive narcotics report filed. Received by the 3rd Psychiatric Hospital, VIP Special Care Ward, single room, windowless, 24-hour surveillance, and intensive treatment. Estimated survival period, 3 to 5 years, depending on intensity of treatment. Gu Qinzhou's gaze swept across the screen, his face devoid of any fluctuation in expression, as if he were viewing 2 ordinary performance reports. He set down his wine glass, his slender fingers slowly caressing the cold glass wall. The taste of revenge was richer than he had imagined. He recalled the look of terror and despair in Su Wan's eyes when she was stripped naked and thrown into the slums. He recalled her pathetic state in the hospital corridor, begging him like a mad dog to save that bastard. He recalled how she instantly collapsed like sludge upon hearing the news of her son's death. He further recalled the live-stream footage of Zhou Mubai in the muddy construction site, acting like a mangy dog with a broken spine, kowtowing until his head bled and his knees shattered. And right now, the image of him lying on that special hospital bed in the mental asylum, covered in tubes, his consciousness gradually collapsing and sinking amidst agony, drugs, and utter despair. Every scene was clearly branded into his mind. Every recollection was like tasting a glass of top-tier vintage wine aged for years. First, the burning pain upon entry, the humiliation of betrayal, followed by a lingering, spicy impact, the thrill of revenge, and finally settling in his chest as a cold, deep, almost eternal satisfaction. Empty? No. The corners of Gu Qinzhou's mouth curved up extremely slowly into a cold arc. How could it be empty? Watching his enemies struggle, wail, and rot bit by bit in the hell he had personally created. This feeling of controlling everything and dominating fate was 100 times more intense than the pleasure brought by any wealth or power. This was the primal, purest thrill brought by destruction. He picked up the satellite phone and dialed a number. "It's me." His voice was low and calm, devoid of emotion. "Mr. Gu," Wang Zheng's respectful voice came from the other end. "Is the matter at Beishan Cemetery taken care of?" Gu Qinzhou asked indifferently. "Yes, Mr. Gu. According to your instructions, a simple concrete tomb, no name, no photo, in a remote location where no one will disturb it." Wang Zheng answered methodically. "Amen." Gu Qinzhou made a sound of acknowledgement, his gaze shifting to the window toward the distant direction of Beishan, where there was only a blurred, dark silhouette. That child with the bastard's blood, that child who once called him daddy and carried 5 years of his false warmth, had finally turned into a handful of ash, casually and coldly sealed beneath concrete, as if he had never existed. A trace of extremely subtle fluctuation, unnoticed even by himself, flashed deep in his eyes, as fleeting as an illusion. Immediately, it was covered by a deeper coldness. As for Su Wan, Gu Qinzhou's tone did not change in the slightest. Make the rules etched into her bones. Give Scar enough money. Understood. It has been arranged. They will do their best. Wang Zheng's voice held no ripples. Zhou Mubai. Gu Qinzhou's fingertip tapped lightly on the rim of the glass, making a crisp sound. The treatment cannot stop. I want him alive, consciously feeling every minute and every second of the pain. Yes, the director of the 3rd hospital understands what to do. The call ended. Gu Qinzhou drained the last bit of amber liquid in his glass. The burning sensation seared from his throat all the way to his stomach, yet could not drive away the coldness in his bones. Instead, it made that peak pleasure of total control clearer and more biting. He walked to the massive desk. The surface was smooth as a mirror, reflecting the brilliant lights of thousands of homes outside. He picked up a simple titanium alloy photo frame from the desk. Inside the frame was not a photo, but a piece of paper. The conclusion page of that paternity test report. Based on DNA analysis results, Gu Qinzhou, sample A, is excluded as the biological father of Gu Yinan, sample B. The bone-chilling black characters remained as clear as a judgment in the dim light. Gu Qinzhou's fingers slowly traced that line of cold print. The fingertip felt the unique, cool touch of the paper. His eyes were deep as a cold pool, containing no anger, no sorrow, only a calm frozen for 10,000 years. Beneath this calm was the ultimate satisfaction of successful revenge, the supreme pleasure brought by destruction, and the cold solitude of standing at the peak of power and hatred, looking down on the ants. 5 years of marriage, a carefully woven web of lies. 5 years of devotion, an utter joke. 5 years of warmth, a bone-chilling humiliation. All the betrayal, all the humiliation, all the anger. Finally, they all transformed into the coldness in his palm right now, and the residual sin of wine in the cup. He won. He won cleanly. He won thoroughly. Su Wan would exhaust the rest of her life in the filth and humiliation of prison. Zhou Mubai would turn into a pile of rotten flesh amidst the treatment of the madhouse. That bastard had already been reduced to a mound of yellow earth on North Mountain. And he, Gu Qinzhou, remained the king of this city, standing at the pinnacle of the pyramid, trampling upon the corpses and tears of the betrayers. He set down the photo frame with a soft click. Then, picking up the decanter from the table, he slowly poured himself a small measure of whiskey. The liquid flowed into the crystal glass with a pleasant, melodic sound. He lifted his glass and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window. Outside lay the never-ending splendor of North City's nightscape, flowing with iridescent light, like a galaxy paved with diamonds. He raised his glass slightly to his vague reflection in the pane, and to the steel forest beneath his feet that lay under his dominion. The ice-cold liquor slid down his throat. Gu Qinzhou closed his eyes, savoring the complex sensation of searing heat and ice-cold chill spreading through his body, finally curling his lips into a silent, bone-chilling, yet utterly gratified smirk. The banquet of revenge had drawn to a close, and this chill at the summit was the supreme nectar, enjoyed exclusively by the victor.